On a quiet morning in Tokyo in the year 1700, then known as Edo, thousands of people rose before sunrise not because they were ambitious, but because survival demanded it, and the city they lived in hid reality far removed from the calm order history often describes. Behind the image of disciplined streets and wooden houses lay a world where a single mistake could mean hunger, disgrace, or disappearance, and where ordinary people lived under rules they did not create and could not escape. Edo was growing faster than any city in the world, crowded beyond imagination, yet most of its residents remained invisible, their lives unfolding in narrow alleys far from the records of scholars and officials. What makes this moment unsettling is that the city appeared peaceful, orderly, and controlled, while beneath that surface, millions lived one bad season away from collapse. The hidden life of Edo was not dramatic in the way wars are dramatic, but it was relentless, shaped by pressure, hierarchy, and the constant effort to remain unseen by power. For common people, daily life in Edo evolved around work that offered little security and demanded absolute discipline, because social order was enforced not only by law, but by expectation and fear. Artisans, laborers, porters, and servants filled the city's lower layers, rising early to secure food, pay rent, and avoid punishment for even minor missteps. A missed tax, a broken rule, or a wrong word spoken to the wrong person could carry consequences that echoed through entire families. Homes were small and fragile, fires were constant threats, and illness spread easily through densely packed neighborhoods where privacy barely existed. Yet despite these pressures, communities formed strong bonds, sharing food, information, and quiet support because isolation meant vulnerability. Survival depended not on wealth or status, but on understanding the rhythms of the city, knowing when to speak, when to bow, and when to disappear into the crowd to avoid drawing attention. Beneath the strict hierarchy that defined Edo society, ordinary people developed subtle ways to preserve dignity and meaning in lives constrained by duty and scarcity. Festivals, storytelling, and simple pleasures offered brief escapes from routine, allowing people to feel human in a system that often treated them as replaceable parts. Faith, superstition, and tradition provided comfort where certainty did not exist, helping individuals explain misfortune and endure loss without rebellion. Many accepted their place not because they believed it was just, but because resistance carried risks few could afford to take. Edo did not crush its people through constant violence, but through quiet control, teaching generations how to survive by adapting rather than challenging. In this hidden world, history unfolded not through grand events, but through ordinary people making small, careful choices each day to protect their families, preserve their identity, and continue living within a city that demanded obedience while offering little mercy. As the city continued to expand, the pressure on ordinary people grew heavier because Edo's size demanded order, and order was enforced through constant supervision and rigid expectations. Neighborhoods were carefully organized, with residents responsible not only for themselves but for one another, creating a system where collective punishment ensured compliance. This meant that a single person's mistake could bring consequences upon an entire street, forcing people to monitor each other's behavior as a matter of survival rather than loyalty. Work was relentless and repetitive, yet necessary, because missing even a single day's labor could mean falling behind on obligations that never paused. Food shortages were common, and while famine was not constant, the fear of it shaped how people ate, stored, and shared what little they had. In this environment, caution became a form of wisdom, and silence often proved safer than honesty, as people learned to navigate power without ever confronting it directly. Despite these constraints, Edo's common people created a vibrant inner world that existed alongside official order, filled with humor, resilience, and quiet resistance. Popular entertainment, informal storytelling, and simple pleasures allowed people to express emotions that could not be spoken openly, preserving individuality within a system designed to suppress it. Markets became places not only of trade but of connection, where news spread quickly and survival strategies were exchanged discreetly. Even hardship produced a kind of creativity as people found ways to repurpose materials, stretch resources, and maintain dignity in circumstances that offered little comfort. This hidden life was not visible to those in power, yet it sustained the city more than laws or punishments ever could. Edo survived not because it was perfectly controlled, but because ordinary people learned to live within its limits without losing themselves entirely. Over time, the rhythms of Edo life became deeply ingrained, shaping how ordinary people understood stability, danger, and hope within a city that rarely explained its rules but enforced them strictly. Fire remained one of the greatest threats, capable of erasing entire neighborhoods overnight, and the constant awareness of this danger influenced how people built, traveled, and slept. Families kept possessions minimal not by choice but by necessity, knowing that attachment could become a liability when everything might vanish without warning. Illness, too, hovered constantly, and with limited medical knowledge, people relied on community care, traditional remedies, and belief to endure periods of suffering. Children grew up early, learning responsibility through observation rather than instruction, absorbing the unspoken lessons of caution and endurance that defined survival in Edo. In this way, hardship became ordinary and endurance became invisible, woven quietly into daily routine rather than recognized as strength. Yet even under these conditions, moments of joy emerged, small but meaningful, offering brief relief from the weight of control and uncertainty. Seasonal festivals, shared meals, and simple entertainments allowed people to reconnect with one another as individuals rather than subjects, reminding them that life extended beyond duty. These moments did not change their circumstances, but they softened them, creating emotional space where resilience could grow. Edo's hidden life was not one of rebellion, but of balance, where ordinary people learned to exist without provoking the forces that governed them. Their survival was not marked by triumph, but by continuity, as generation after generation adapted to a city that demanded obedience while quietly depending on their labor. Through patience, community, and quiet determination, the common people of Edo sustained a society that rarely acknowledged their sacrifices, yet could not survive without them. As the years passed, the hidden life of Edo revealed itself not through dramatic change, but through remarkable consistency, because survival depended on understanding that stability itself was fragile and had to be maintained carefully. Ordinary people accepted that their lives would remain limited in opportunity, yet they invested deeply in relationships, routines, and small achievements that gave structure to their existence. Marriage, apprenticeship, and neighborhood ties became lifelines, anchoring individuals in a world where official recognition was rare. Shame carried real weight in Edo society, and the fear of dishonor often guided behavior more strongly than fear of punishment, encouraging self-control and conformity as tools for survival. In this environment, people learned to internalize rules, turning external authority into personal discipline, which allowed the city to function smoothly without constant force. This quiet submission was not weakness, but a calculated response to a system that offered few alternatives. By the early 17th century, Edo stood as a city sustained by those history rarely names, a place where ordinary lives formed the foundation of extraordinary growth. The common people who lived in its shadows did not seek to reshape the world, yet through persistence, cooperation, and restraint, they ensured its continuity. Their stories remained largely unwritten, yet they are present in every street that survived fire, every market that reopened after hardship, and every tradition that endured despite pressure to conform. Edo's true strength lay not in its rulers or laws, but in the invisible resilience of its people, who learned to live fully within narrow limits. In understanding their hidden lives, we see that history is not only shaped by power and conflict, but by the countless quiet decisions made by ordinary individuals who chose each day to endure. As the city continued to thrive in appearance, the distance between the visible city and the hidden lives beneath it grew wider, because order on the surface depended on constant compromise below.
Ordinary people learned that safety came from predictability, and predictability came from obedience, so they shaped their lives around expectations rather than desires. Dreams were modest, focused on stability rather than advancement, and success was measured by continuity, not change. Parents taught children how to avoid trouble before teaching them how to seek opportunity, enforcing a culture where caution was inherited alongside skill. Even emotions were regulated, expressed quietly within trusted circles rather than openly in public, because attention itself could invite risk. In this way, Edo's common people developed a sophisticated emotional discipline, allowing them to survive not only material hardship, but the psychological weight of living under constant observation. Their resilience was internal, invisible, and rarely acknowledged, yet it allowed millions to coexist within a system that demanded conformity above all else. By the turn of the century, Edo had become a city defined by paradox, rigid yet adaptable, controlled yet